Final Fantasy IV wasn't too bad with Cecil only, or Cecil. Yeah, I got absolutely destroyed in the comments over my pronunciation of his name, and rightfully so, but that was how they pronounced his name in the 3D remake, as well as in Dissidia, so no matter how I pronounced this word, I would have been roasted either way, go figure. Luckily, this is Final Fantasy V, and Bartz's name is easy to pronounce. Final Fantasy V is more similar to Final Fantasy III than 4, as you can choose any job you want for any character, and party members aren't rotating in and out all the time. Additionally, there's no penalty for switching jobs. These characters aren't exactly equal in terms of raw stats. Some characters are slightly better for some things, such as Ferris having naturally high strength and agility, where Lena has naturally high magic. These differences are not really worth worrying about because they all excel at everything, and in this playthrough, Bartz has to do literally everything. Here are the rules. I can only use Bartz in battle, no items in battle except equipment, no major glitches. Final Fantasy V was the first one in the series I played. I played the GBA version, and while I didn't grow up with the series, I still have fond memories of this game. If you haven't played this game, please play it first. This video is full of spoilers, so let's begin. We are first treated to a long and unskippable cutscene. We see a lot of stuff involving elemental crystals. Oh wait, this is Final Fantasy IV's intro again. I'm sorry, I couldn't really tell the difference. Let's try that again. Anyway, like in many other Final Fantasy games, this game's plot prominently features them, and we meet Triple Question Mark. Triple Question Mark has to beat some enemies to save Lena, but unlike Triple Question Mark from Pokemon Crystal, that's not his real name. And Lena catches on to him, so he says his name is Bartz. Yeah, that's his name. We then meet an old man named Galuf, who for some reason can't remember anything except that his name is Galuf, and that he has to go to the Wind Shrine, which is convenient because Lena says she has to go there as well. Bartz says he has better things to do, although he refuses to elaborate, and I have questions. But somehow we find the pair later down the path despite Bartz riding a chocobo and them not. We then steal a boat, as well as one of the coolest characters in any RPG ever, Sildra, and set sail to the Wind Shrine. Sorry Bartz, your adventure will have to wait because plot. At the top of the Wind Shrine is the Wing Raptor. The Wing Raptor is basically just a reskinned Final Fantasy IV Mist Dragon fight. Attack when it's visible, don't attack when it's not, and you win. We then unlock jobs, which is the core gimmick of this game. I have Bartz start on the Night job to get the two-handed ability, which is absolutely busted, especially this early in the game. We then have to get a key to unlock a gate to go into the Torna Canal, which, according to Zoc, is infested with monsters. However, we later discover that these are just random sea creatures who don't even attack, they're just animals. Fish, the things that live in water. Zoc, why did you lock this? You probably just ruined the economy of several countries doing these shenanigans. But then we find Karl. Karl's simple, but he's pretty tough and needed a little bit of grinding, but it's fine. Sadly, we end up losing Sildra and get swept away to the ship graveyard, which is full of undead monsters. They're fairly weak, but a bit annoying. We then run into Siren. Siren tries to steal Bartz's soul, but Bartz, being an identity thief who wouldn't think twice to steal retirement money from the elderly, has no soul, so it's not very effective. And as for the battle, Siren switches between two forms, normal and undead. Neither of them matter though, because Bartz, thanks to the two-handed ability, hits like a truck. Moving on. We now have to climb a mountain to get a wind drake to fly across the ocean, but we bump into Magissa, who wants to kidnap Lena. Bartz is used to this song and dance, but Magissa is a little tricky, as once you hit her, she'll summon Forza, which, as you can tell by the name, can hit pretty hard. This took a couple of attempts to get right, but we're over-leveled, so it's fine. We then try to convince the king to stop using the crystal, but he's not really convinced that it's such a bad thing. I mean, I'm not either. If the crystal explodes, we get more jobs, which is good. But then we run into Garula. Garula is just a normal enemy. They are literally everywhere, and they are very easy. This one is no different. Moving on. We then teleport to another meteorite, but Bartz gets arrested after presenting a fake weapons permit, and so he is arrested awaiting trial. However, Sid, who is apparently a pyromaniac, starts blowing up random walls. Guards, get me away from this guy. We then board the fire-powered ship and encounter Liquid Flame at the bottom. Liquid Flame is tricky, Blaze does huge damage, however as a berserker, Bartz does huger damage, so we win. We discover that this ship, which is in the sea, is somehow physically connected to the castle despite being called the fire-powered ship. Unfortunately, we don't have time to think about the intricacies of this plot as we have to escape the castle within a time limit. However, we have plenty of time to loot some chests and we find the ribbon. The ribbon boosts all of your stats and makes you immune to several status conditions. This item has no business being available this early into the game, but here it is. But in order to escape with this item, we have to fight Iron Claw. Iron Claw doesn't show up. We now have to find Mad to cheer up Sad, who is now Sid. But before we can do that, we run into Ifrit. Ifrit tries to intimidate Bartz, but Bartz just gives him the RPG equivalent of a bitch slap. Ifrit, now utterly cucked, joins our team. Next is Byblos, and he's quite annoying since his abilities can ruin our stats, slowing the fight to a crawl, but while he did get slow off, I just lucked out in this fight. Apparently Drain and Discord can miss, and Berserker is just immune to confusion altogether, so he didn't even do anything. To cross the desert to get to the next crystal, we get Mid and Sid to summon a sandworm, which Bartz has to beat up. I unfortunately misclicked on the hole, thus resulting in Bartz's HP being quartered. Oops. However, this didn't really matter because this fight is easy. Moving on. We then find King Tycoon, but we fall into some pit, and so does Mid and Sid. Huh. We then annoy even more wildlife, this time the Cray Claw, so Bartz cooks up some cheese biscuits and mashed potatoes and serves them to the Cray Claw, and this convinces it to go away. Moving on. We're now high in the air and have to defeat 2 sets of flamethrowers and 2 sets of rocket launchers. The flamethrowers are pretty simple, they do pretty good damage, but since Bartz has mastered Monk, which has the highest stamina stat in the game, he can just outlast them. The rocket launchers are a bit more annoying because they can inflict confuse and halve your HP, but like before, the Berserk ability negates confusion, and if they can't confuse you, their HP having abilities don't matter. Soul Cannon is actually annoying though. His first few attacks have your HP and inflict old. As a freelancer, Bartz has the Rippin which blocks the status. However, his main attack does pretty big damage, meaning he has to quickly heal it off. Oh dear, actual strategy. So I max out Geomancer. This job is super quick to master and gives you a pretty respectable magic stat. I then get White Magic level 4 and this seemed to be fine. I challenge optional boss Ramah just in case I need the summon. At this point he does hardly any damage. We then go to Licks and have plot things happen, but we're mainly here because potions are cheap. I then have Bartz equip the Angel Ring. We won't have another chance to buy these until way later, and the magic defense is quite good, so might as well. Back to the plot, we encounter Archeoaevis at level 36. King Tycoon says it can change its weakness at will, but it seems the only thing it was actually weak to was pain, and it was very permanent. Exdeath then appears, says a thing, and then leaves. Galuf suddenly remembers he left the sink on before leaving his world, and so he has to go back to his castle to turn it off. Water costs money, so he decides to leave us here, concerned that we would never be able to come back to our world. Okay, but all the crystals are still gone, and so the world's still completely boned, meaning we have to follow Galuf and stop Exdeath anyway, which requires backtracking to every meteorite. Unfortunately, every meteorite suddenly, by sheer coincidence, has a boss we have to beat up. Oh dear. First up is Purobolos, which is just a reskin Mom fight, but with a twist. When they're defeated through any means besides self-destruct, they automatically cast a Rise. We could stall their MP out, but it's much easier to just spam kick until they go away. Next up is Titan. He just attacks once, uses Earthshaker, and then goes away. Okay then. And lastly for the meteorite bosses is Dank Chimera. This thing is the same as Dormy Chimera, except it has boss music for some reason. Yeah, not really selling it. With all the meteorites activated, we successfully go to Galuf's world. I'm sure we didn't forget a single boss. But then we are ambushed by an abductor who is easily one-shot. Bartz opens a chest, and it contained the plot. We are put into a party of only Galuf, which means the challenge is over. Can you beat Final Fantasy V with Bartz only? No. Unfortunately, the plot doesn't let you. Anyway, thanks for watching, have a good day. To avoid being soft-locked, I did grind Galuf to level 25 before he went to his world. However, Gilgamesh's first fight is a complete joke. I actually think level 20 would have been just fine. And now that we're back with Bartz, we can continue the run. Gilgamesh's second fight is actually a little trickier as he attacks quickly and does pretty good damage. I think the play here should have been to use Protect first as it would have required less healing in the long run, but this is fine. I then run into some random fairy orcs who just start trolling me and start randomly reviving my party members. Why? I now have to save a Moogle from a Tyrannosaur. Somehow this ancient dinosaur monster skeleton is susceptible to the old status. Okay then. We now have to go save Kryl's Windrake, however on the way we encounter triple question mark at level 38. He sends out his... oh, he's gone now. I then run into Dragonpod. This boss is quite painful because each flower inflicts some sort of status condition, and I'm not immune to paralysis yet, which means I can get stun locked. However, you can use the monk job to cheese this fight, as the main boss never actually attacks. Just use kick when its flowers appear, don't attack when they're not there, and yep, it's the Mist Dragon fight again. I then find Bone Mail here. This item makes it so you can't heal in battle using cure spells or potion, and then you take extra damage from Fire and Holy, but in exchange, you get so much defense, you resist ice, you become immune to even more status conditions, and all drain spells used against you are reversed. For a solo run where you can't get revived anyway, this armor is amazing, and you get it in only the middle of the game. Gilgamesh number 3 is tricky. His missile attack reduces Bartz's HP by a whole 75%. Then Enkidu appears and he just spams healing magic. Their combo brings Bartz to just 4 HP and I can't heal it off. However, Enkidu then uses Vampire, which causes Bartz to steal 963 HP thanks to having the undead status, allowing Bartz to survive the rest of the fight. Oh my goodness, this Bone Mail is awesome. We then follow Bob to the submarine, climb a tower, and attempt to deactivate it, only to be ambushed by Atomos. Atomos sucks, literally, and figuratively. Since I have to have all party members start KO'd when possible, they immediately get sucked into the void, and once that's happened, Atomos will spam back-to-back comments which each hit like a truck. However, it's weak to sleep, which gives Bartz enough time to set up shell and protect, but then it turns out Bartz didn't even need either anyway because he just stun locks it with sleep, preventing it from doing anything for the entire battle. Did I mention Atomos sucks? Then Bob dies a very needless death. Why did he wait in the generator room for so long after turning it off? I don't know. Plot. Let's just go with it. We now have to fight the 4 crystals of this planet. This fight may seem a bit daunting, but if Bartz equips the bone meal, a flame shield, and gets the top crystal down to low HP, this fight is now unlosable thanks to the high evasion, high defense, and constant healing from Firaga. But of course it turns out we shouldn't have done that, as Exdeath now has control over the crystals. Karl then tries to save us, but then gets wrecked. To save Karl, Galuf sacrifices one of the crystals to push Karl out of the way, taking the hit instead. With everyone incapacitated, he faces Exdeath himself in what is essentially a hopeless fight. Exdeath opens up by doing a huge amount of damage with high-level spells, which Galuf can barely tank before getting shell off. However, Galuf is able to fire back with his own black magic, doing a huge amount of damage while tanking every single hit, even at 0 HP. Not even the power of Meteor can stop him, and Tella is jealous. However, while Galuf eventually emerges victorious and forces Exdeath to retreat, he collapses, and that's it for him. We'll avenge you, Galuf. But not before getting absolutely wrecked by Gilgamesh. This fight is a crapshoot to say the least. It's also optional, just don't open the chest. However, I try to battle as many optional bosses as possible in these challenges, so battle Gilgamesh we will. Gilgamesh spams a ton of blue magic in this fight, and many of these inflict some status that can mess Bartz up if he's not immune. However, it's not hard to get the right luck, as this is a scripted battle, and once he transforms, he completely drops the ball, and Exdeath gets embarrassed by proxy and casts Gilgamesh into the void. Well, damn. Next up is Exdeath himself. He'll often open up with Doom, which is actually good since that means he didn't attack. Since we have a flame shield, we absorb fire damage, and with a shield, we dodge many of Exdeath's attacks. Eventually at low HP, he'll start attacking twice per turn, and if he uses Firaga, Bartz will heal up a ton of HP, and with 4 seconds left, Exdeath is defeated. And now we're back to Bartz's world, except we're not, however we actually are because plot. We now have to get the sacred tablets to get the 12 sealed items, although to beat the game we only have to get one of them to unlock the airship. But before we can even start getting the sacred tablets, we have to fight gargoyles. One pair guards each of the sacred tablets. They're quite easy, so I'm not going to go over them again, but here are all the fights real quick. The first sacred tablet's final boss is technically Bahamut, but we can fight him later. Next up is Melusine. She's pretty similar to mages if you play Chrono Trigger in that she shifts her weakness, so you just have to find the right one. In this case, she was weak to fire, and Bartz manages to get 3 massive hits off before she changed weaknesses. Bartz had done enough damage, so I just had him equip the Kotetsu, which does typeless damage, and Bartz scores a crit for the win. We then get Lena back, Bartz becomes homeless, and the final part of the game begins. Note that every dungeon from this point on besides the interdimensional rift is optional, but I'll do as many as I can for completionist sake. I first go to the sealed temple to redeem the first sacred tablet. I think Bartz's best in slot 2-handed weapon is the Masamune. As well, it technically has lower attack than the Excalibur, it can crit, thus its average damage is actually the highest of all of the sacred weapons. Also, it guarantees a first strike, which is good for random encounters. However, I grab the Excalibur as it'll be useful when Bartz gets dual wielding. I then buy the Hermes sandals. This item grants immunity to paralysis, sleep, stop, and slow, and it grants haste at the start of the battle. Combined with the bone mail and ribbon, Bartz is mostly untouchable as far as status goes. That's right, I still have the bone mail, that's how good this item is. Phoenix Tower's a boss rush, but all the bosses are quite easy and go down on 1 or 2 hits. I then get Haryu and then go to the pirate's hideout to get Sildra. I then visit the interdimensional rift to get level 5 death from a level checker. You might be thinking, hang on, that shouldn't be possible. Wouldn't I just game over if I was hit? And you'd be right. However, the bone mail has one final trick. The undead status makes most forms of instant death heal for 9,999 HP, and level 5 death bypasses death immunity. Thus, while the spell doesn't KO, it also doesn't technically fail, and since the blue mage can equip bone mail, Bartz can actually learn level 5 death. Level 5 death means we can grind for AVP in Galuf's basement, one of the fastest but also safest places to get AVP. Thus, Bartz can quickly get Ninja Mastered, unlocking the ability to dual wield the Excalibur and Masamune, and freeing up the ability slot that was used for 2-handed. Next up is Wendigo. Wendigo is a weird fight because only one of them is the real Wendigo. However, Bartz does so much damage that making a couple of wrong guesses is fine. Moving on. Next up is Bahamut, the one you've probably not been waiting for. Bahamut is in theory a very difficult boss, but he doesn't start off using his most powerful attacks, instead reserving that for when he has low HP. In this case, his overconfidence is his undoing. Bartz hits like a truck and has permanent haste, so Bahamut only has time to get off 1 Mega Flare before going down. Next up is Fork Tower. Like everything else up until the interdimensional rift, this place is optional, and I debated on whether or not to do it since it technically wouldn't be valid for a solo run since it requires having other party members go up the other tower to beat the other boss. However, I decided to allow it, but on the condition that Bartz climbs the first tower, then I reload a save and have him climb the second tower. A lot of bosses are gated behind this tower since it unlocks the submarine, and as concluded earlier, this game isn't technically beatable with only Bartz anyway, so I allow it. Anyway, first up is Omniscient. His first few attacks do nothing, and Bartz hits hard and fast enough with Thundaga that he can't react in time with Reflect. Just spam Thundaga until he uses Flare, and then he goes away. Next up is Minotaur. He absorbs Holy, so Bartz has to unequip the Excalibur and swap it for the Kotetsu. In addition, he counters everything, but he's otherwise pretty passive and goes down without much of a fight. This earns us Flare and Holy, so I train Bartz to get level 6 black and white magic for their respective spells. Moving on. Next up are the 3 little pigs. After doing what is probably the worst dungeon in the entire game, you have to fight them. Their gimmick is that you have to defeat them all within quick succession or else they respawn, which just means cast Thundaga on all of them until they go away. Moving on. Next up is Leviathan. This fight isn't required to get the tablet, but we're already here, so we might as well. Leviathan likes to use Tidal Wave, which does pretty good damage, but that's its only threatening attack. Leviathan also counters most attacks with Entangle, but Bartz is immune to it thanks to the Hermes Sandals. This fight's not too bad though, and thus we were able to defeat him pretty easily. Next up is Odin. This fight has a time limit of only 1 minute. Moving on. Next up is Calofisteri, which we encounter in a forest in the Interdimensional Rift, and she's the first required boss here. However, none of her abilities can do anything to Bartz to do the bone mail and ribbon, so this fight's completely free. I attempt Omega, nah, we'll have to come back later. Next up is Dank Byblos, another required fight, but it's just a palette swap of Byblos. Since Bartz is immune to everything except Magic Hammer and Wind Slash doesn't really do much, and all Magic Hammer does is lower MP, which we don't really need, this fight's mostly free. Moving on. There are a bunch of these random things. I don't know what they're doing here, but they're pretty easy. However, for some reason they have boss music. Just thought I'd mention them. Catastrophe is the next required boss. It spans Earthshaker, which does decent damage, but Bartz does more than decent damage, so we win. Okay, this is not even a boss fight. All he does is say Ribbit. He doesn't even attack. This game is weird. Twintania just uses Tidal Wave and Ice Storm, which Bartz can shrug off pretty easily, and now we're in space. First up is Gilgamesh. He's delirious, so just hit him once and he'll come to his senses. Necrophobe is next. Finally, an actual boss fight. His barriers spam high-level spells, of which Bartz is weak to Firaga and Holy due to the Bone Mail, so Shell is absolutely needed here. Necrophobe himself is weak to Holy, so we just duel the Excalibur and Holy Lance. And then Gilgamesh just pops in, and then blows up. Okay, I decide to backtrap to pick up one last job, but it's deep underwater and so we have a time limit. We also have to beat famed Mimic Gogo, one of the secret bosses of this game. He doesn't really do anything except counterattacks, and his counterattacks do quite a bit of damage, so it's best to set up with Blink. And I add on Shell just in case. Once he takes enough damage, he'll become enraged. However, Bartz just completely overwhelms him with damage before he can do anything at all, thanks to Rapid Fire, the Masamune getting critical hits, and the Chicken Knife permanently cancelling his Mime show. In fact, we literally steal his job as we unlock Mime. Mime is a totally broken job for spellcasters, but it can't equip swords, and Mimic isn't a very good ability in a solo run, so unfortunately the Mimic's legacy ends here in the bottom of the ocean. Moving on. We had Dank Leviathan in Final Fantasy IV, and in Final Fantasy V we now have Space Leviathan. By equipping HP plus 30%, Bartz's HP will be increased to over 7,000 HP. In addition, we can equip Berserk, which means his attack output will be increased at the cost of not being able to do anything except attack, which doesn't matter because that's all we want to do anyway. The Masamune can crit, the Diamond Shield resists electricity and grants a ton of evasion, the Coral Ring absorbs water and negates fire, the Bone Mail absorbs poison and literal death and resists ice, and we're at level 61, which is a prime number, meaning that blue magic will have no effect. This cheesy lasagna of memes means his only way to do any meaningful damage is with Maelstrom, which he'll probably just heal off when he hits us with something we absorb, and his basic attack. He can stall with Mighty Guard, but it's only a matter of time before we just win. And our reward for beating him is the Ragnarok, the strongest sword in the game. Last but not least for optional bosses is Omega. This boss is complete bullshit, even for a full team, but just like with Space Leviathan, there is a cheese strat. Just Spellblade Thundaga and use Rapid Fire and equip a Flame Ring to absorb fire damage, and Bartz will do ludicrous damage one-shotting him. Our final loadout is a level 62 Freelancer with a Ragnarok, Hermes Sandals, Ribbon, and White Robe. For abilities, we have White Magic level 6 and Two-Handed. If this battle is too challenging, I can retry at a higher level, but 62 is already such a high level for the game. Now for the final boss, the main antagonist of the game, Exdeath. Exdeath is actually pretty weak compared to the previous fight, as he mainly just attacks or uses White Hole, which the Ribbon blocks, allowing Bartz to set up. He does go for Meteor, but Bartz tanks it. Once his HP gets low enough, the Void takes over and the real fight begins. Space Exdeath is easily the most difficult boss in the game for a solo run, because he has 4 sections with a ton of health that each need to be defeated, all of which use the most powerful attacks in the game. You know what that means? Yep, we spam kick. Nah, I'm just kidding. In this fight, it's important to keep shell and protect up when possible, and to not let Bartz' HP go below 1500, as Flare and Vacuum Wave can do a ton of damage. Blink is also really good for dodging Vacuum Wave. However, Space Exdeath might go for Dispel, requiring Bartz to set up everything again. Almagest and Grand Cross are annoying. Almagest is basically Space Exdeath's equivalent of Dank Zemus' Big Bang attack, doing a ton of damage and inflicting sap. Grand Cross can inflict mini or drop Bartz' HP to 1, requiring immediate healing. These attacks aren't very accurate, but when they hit, it usually sucks. I focused on the front, back, and middle sections as these are the most annoying ones to deal with. Once one body part is left, Space Exdeath will start attacking twice per turn, often using Meteor and Comet, which deal random damage. Meteor can do a ton of damage if Exdeath gets enough high rolls, so Bartz has to keep his HP above 3000. Eventually, Bartz is left with just 22 MP, which is not enough to heal anymore, so I give up on that and just go all in on attacking, and it seems to be just enough. With that, Bartz has beaten the entire game by himself, with an asterisk. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good day.